Hi everybody, I'm Melinda Gallant, and I have another great Cape Conversations today, all about the state senate and somebody running for the job. So come along, let's have another great Cape Conversations. Hi everybody, I'm back with you again today with another candidate for state senate, a very delightful person, and I hope you get to know him today through this wonderful show called Cape Conversations. I'm Melinda Gallant, and I want to welcome John Mahoney.
Hi Melinda, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So John,
Yes,
you live in Plymouth.
I do.
And you're going to be representing Cape Cod. Do you think you can do that?
God willing, and absolutely I can.
You can. Good, 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 good. Well, so tell me, John, I ask every candidate this, why in the heck do you want to do this? Isn't it a pain?
No, absolutely not. I have a passion for this. I grew up at the other end of the district in Pembroke. I first ran for office in '88 when I was 20. I came in second out of 3 for the select board in Pembroke. And I moved to Plymouth 22 years ago, and I've never lost that passion. So I have 12 years on the select board in Plymouth underneath my belt.
Wow.
A pretty diverse resume and a track record of getting things done. And you have an opportunity here where I don't think anybody could have predicted that Mr. DiMacedo would have resigned.
I think it blew everybody's mind.
And I think I didn't jump in and compete for this seat, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life.
Sure.
So here we are.
Sure. Well, excellent. But you must do something for work. What do you do for a living?
Sure. I'm a member of Local 4.
Oh, you
so,
are?
Elevator
So
Constructors Union.
Yeah?
And I'm
A
an
union
elevator
man.
Yeah, I work during the day in construction, new construction. The last week or so I've been on there is a new tower going up adjacent to the Boston Garden.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I got permission to leave the job early to get down here today to meet you.
Excellent.
And here we are.
Excellent.
So,
So you know what it's like to get your hands dirty.
Yes.
Like fishermen.
So I get off the highway in Plymouth, cleaned up, made myself look good, and come back down here to meet you.
Well, excellent.
I
Well, you
do.
clean up nice, but here's the thing. A lot of people on the Cape, and we have a lot of retirees, and we are an aging population, but we've got fishermen here and builders,
Sure.
and they need somebody to represent them who knows how to get their hands dirty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have a pretty decent familiarity with the communities. In the 90s, I worked out of the Pepsi facility on 3A over in Sagamore Beach, and I drove a tractor trailer for 5 to 7 years.
Wow.
And had a pretty good knowledge of every road on Cape Cod, from Shankpainter Road to the former A&P down in P-Town, Commercial Street, all the way up to the bridge.
Oh my gosh.
All the way up to the bridge.
Oh, so, that's great. That's great.
And one of my favorite restaurants is on Main Street in Chatham, but we can talk about that some other time.
Wouldn't be the Squire, would it?
No. I'm sorry. The Impudent Oyster.
Oh, of course.
But I promise if I get elected to the seat, we'll come up with a few more favorite restaurants.
Right. Well, you got to find a few in Falmouth, and there are plenty here in Sandwich.
Undoubtedly.
Right.
We'll get it done.
Well, the best news about Sandwich is we have Fisherman's View, and those fishermen are from Plymouth originally.
Okay.
And they built a beautiful restaurant on the canal, the only restaurant sitting right on the canal. You can watch the big boats go through, have fabulous fresh fish. So you'll have to check it out.
I will. I promise you I will.
Excellent.
Maybe you can come with me.
There we go. So tell me, what are you going to do in the state senate? I mean, I've had a lot of people here, on here saying, well, I'm going to change things. Well, change wasn't done in a day, as they say. If Rome would have been built in a day, they would have hired their contractors.
Correct.
So what are you going to do?
So I tell people all the time that I got involved, and when I got elected, especially in '08 to the select board in Plymouth, I wasn't there to continue to endorse the status quo.
Okay.
So my 2 favorite economists are Albert Einstein and Robert Frost.
Okay.
And I really don't say that tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
So Albert Einstein's the definition of insanity. If you can't keep conducting the same experiment expecting the same, with different results.
Right.
Doesn't work.
Right.
And obviously Frost, the road not taken.
Right.
And specifically, I can point to 7 or 8 years ago, the state legislature at the height of the recession passed a local meals tax option. And the belief was that the communities had a problem with revenue. Now I disagreed with that. So they passed this local meals tax option at the state level. And they told the communities, you don't have to pass this tax. But if you can do whatever you want with it. So the problem is, Melinda, is that I know what government does with the money. They bury it into the general fund. The money goes into this black hole.
They do that in towns as well.
Correct. Well, that's what, no.
They do.
All the towns and cities do that.
Yeah, they have.
So
they
and
have
that
the
money,
general
once
fund.
it goes in there, it's
Right.
never to return.
Right.
So people came up to me back then, and I think some individuals that I've served with would, when they were asked the question, do you support the meals tax option, they have to go off and conduct a poll to see if it's politically beneficial to
Sure.
support it.
Sure.
With me, it's this simple. If it was going into the general fund, I'll work to defeat it. If you want to earmark it for something, I'm in.
Right.
We ended up earmarking, we constructed the first town hall, the first town hall ever built in the 400-year history of the community of Plymouth. It was $54 million, bonded over 30 years, paid for in its entirety with the local meals tax option. We had to pass a home rule petition. That money goes into its own separate interest-bearing account and can only be used to pay for the note on the town hall.
town hall.
And obviously, in a community like Plymouth,
Wow, it's a
what
big
is,
community.
what is especially beneficial, Melinda, is upwards of 2/3 of that revenue comes from people that don't live in Plymouth. So anywhere potentially up to $35 to $40 million of that revenue is coming from people who live outside of the Commonwealth, who live outside of the country, who live outside of the community. And they're investing in infrastructure for you. So you didn't have to expand the tax base, you didn't have to diversify it, you didn't have to raise property taxes. So that is the textbook example in New England today, in my opinion, of investing in infrastructure without always raising property taxes.
Sure.
Okay? So, and I'll hold that up. And I have no problem backing off that statement, but you have to provide me with a superior example.
So, is Plymouth still the fastest growing county in the state?
I don't know about, are you referencing the county or the community?
Well, Plymouth County, and then Plymouth the city. I mean, I'd always
Plymouth
for
the
years,
town. Plymouth the town.
The town. They were both the fastest growing in the state
Sure.
at one point.
So probably in the 70s and 80s and early 90s,
Right.
suburban sprawl
Yeah.
was absolutely out of control. In the town of Plymouth, I don't want to offend anybody on Cape Cod,
No, it's all
but
right.
on December 21st of 1620, the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth.
Plymouth, right.
But they did make a rest stop initially
They
in
did
Provincetown.
make a rest stop. That
In
is
Provincetown.
correct. That
They
is
stopped in
correct.
Provincetown, they made their way
Right.
to Plymouth.
The first stop was there. The second stop was Plymouth.
Sure. So in 1970, if you look at the federal census, 350 years later, the community was only 18,000 people. Now it's 60.
Yeah.
So in the last 50 years, you've added almost 50,000 people.
Right.
That's not sustainable,
No,
and
no.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
So we're probably, the last census, I think we were in the 56, 58 range. You're probably going to look at us come in that 63 to 67 range.
And that's just for the city of Plymouth.
Town of Plymouth.
Town of Plymouth. I'm
Yes.
sorry, town of Plymouth.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
Because
Plymouth,
there's Marshfield, there's all those other towns.
right, there's 27 communities in Plymouth County.
Right, right.
One city, Brockton.
That's right, Brockton.
26
I
towns.
always forget that.
And 3 of the 26 towns are in the Senate district.
Yeah.
So you have Pembroke, Kingston, and Plymouth.
Right.
And then 3 of the towns from Barnstable County
Right.
they comprise the rest of that district.
Right, right,
Sandwich, Bourne,
right.
and Falmouth.
Falmouth, right.
Sorry, I just pointed at Falmouth. I won't do that again.
No, that's okay. So how are you, as a person who's from Pembroke
Correct.
originally,
Originally.
how are you going to connect with the people in Falmouth? And I'm going to ask you that because the people in Falmouth, I mean, I've lived here 40 years in Sandwich, but even I sometimes don't connect with the people in Falmouth. I mean, they're an entity unto themselves. It's almost as if they're from Maine and you can't get there from here. There's a lot of people that go through them to go to the islands. We know that. They go through the town, and it's a vibrant little downtown, vibrant.
Sure.
And they have thriving businesses. My son has a business on Main Street there that is thriving. But how are you going to connect? What are you going to do to connect with those people?
Well, it's going to be my job to be present in all 6 of those communities.
Okay.
You know, this will not be an off-Cape versus an on-Cape thing.
I see.
And I can tell you right now, I knocked on doors a couple of weekends ago in Falmouth, and
Yeah.
some of the engagements, the interactions I had were some of the most enjoyable I've had in 10 years of canvassing neighborhoods. I'm going to be on the ground in the town of Plymouth, whenever we had an issue, and you could see that that was going to come before the select board, we're going to have to vote. I'm a huge proponent of site visits. You have to get on the ground, see what the issue is,
Sure.
take that data in, and arrive at a decision. I'm going to be living in these 6 towns.
Sure.
Obviously, I have a pretty solid history of Pembroke and Kingston. 30 years in Pembroke. I got out of Silver Lake High School, Regional High School in '85. The last 22 years in Plymouth. And, I referenced my experience in the 90s with respect to Pepsi Cola, but I'm going to get on the ground and you're going to go out and meet people. The core issues are the same. The core
True.
issues are the same.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay? It's water. Okay,
Right.
that is always taken for granted.
Wastewater.
It's water and wastewater.
Right.
Okay, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay, opioids,
Yeah.
public education. The core issues are the same. And then
Right.
when you break down under a couple of layers, you're going to get into some unique issues to each of those
Sure,
6 communities.
sure,
But I have no problem going out and figuring what those are.
Well, housing is a huge issue on the Cape,
Sure.
affordable housing on the Cape.
Sure.
We're an aging population, and somebody's going to have to take care of us.
Sure.
I'm on the board of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, and I sit on both the bridge committee, which is, we're a proponent of the 2 new bridges coming in.
Correct.
We definitely are a proponent of that, and no, it's not going to bring more people. It's just going to make it easier for us to move around
Sure.
if they do that. And I'm talking about us as in those people who live on this side of the bridge. But I was in another meeting where it was about housing, and it was down Cape, and the people were very agitated. They were going to put in affordable housing. And this young woman stood up who was a nurse, and she stated that she was a nurse. And she said, well, who's going to take care of you at Cape Cod Hospital? Because if I can't get out of an apartment into an affordable condo or something with my 2 kids, because I'm divorced and I'm a working parent, single working parent, what am I going to do? So, our housing assistant corps here is wonderful, and they've helped make a lot of changes to regulations and housing and what have you. But my question is that on your priority list? Because everything is, Plymouth is no different. My God, your South Shore is so expensive. So expensive.
Correct. So I think you have to dial in to affordable housing. I think there's a multitude of factors there, especially whether you own a house and what are those property taxes are you paying on that house?
We'll pay the highest on the Cape here in Sandwich.
Okay. What are you paying in property taxes on the home, and what are you
Right.
getting in return for services?
Right.
And then on top of that, if you're renting, what are you paying? What does the marketplace dictate for you to pay for a 1, 2, or 3 bedroom apartment?
Right.
Nobody talks about water. Okay, and the textbook example today is in Brockton, Massachusetts. And I'm worried. So I think long term, it's not my objective to be a politician who at the end of the day is doing whatever they can to get elected and to make themselves look good in the short term, but compromise our future financially. And if you look at the city of Brockton, they probably have a $350 million budget. They're into desalinization. Okay?
Right.
So water and taxation. There was a $75 million facility, desalinization, built on the Taunton River up in, I believe, Swansea. They signed a 20-year agreement, $7 to $8 million a year. So once you get to, which I believe expires in 26, so the city of Brockton, you're going to get to, which they don't take any water from. Okay? So you're paying $140 to $160 million over 20 years for water that you don't take. So you have $7 to $8 million in your budget that shouldn't be there. Because after they signed the 20-year contract, they went into conservation and they proactively invested in infrastructure. Okay? Negating the need to go into desalinization. But they had already signed the contract, which they're trying to get out of. So imagine a community arriving in 2026, you're going to look back at the past 20 years and realize with 3% for inflation, present value of money, that they invested $300 to $400 million and got nothing in return.
Well, it's ridiculous.
Okay?
Right.
So that is a factor. Okay, responsible taxation is always dismissed because we always just look at the soundbite of affordable housing. So it's water, it's responsible taxation, which we don't have. The hypocrisy of collecting a roads tax from the Massachusetts taxpayer, the auto excise tax on their vehicle, that doesn't go to roads. So
I
you're
knew
making
that.
you're making the community more expensive to live in instead of making it less expensive in providing more services. So, and then the other factor is if you look at the three communities that comprise, in this district on the Cape, you look at Bourne, Sandwich, and Falmouth, you have a land area of 130 square miles. Okay? You've only added 500 people between the 2000 to 2010 census. So why is that? Because you ran out of land and you reached build out.
Right.
So now you're fighting over scraps. Your population is aging and you're trying to figure out what to do. So,
And we have this huge military reservation in the middle of everything.
correct.
I'm not against the military, I'm just saying, there it sits.
Okay. So, and that's what is that, 22,000 square acres?
I think, if not a little bit more, but
Okay.
yeah, I think that's.
So you have to do sensible things. You want to invest proactively in affordable housing. You make sure you have long-term water is, that you're mitigating risk and you have redundancy in your system. You're going to have to, especially on this sandbar that is called Cape Cod, you're going to have to invest in wastewater structures.
Oh, we know that, yeah.
But I can tell you right now, and I'm assuming that you've had this problem down in the Cape, we have it on the South Shore especially, is that there was a piece of legislation passed in 1969 called 40B.
Yeah,
Okay?
of course we have it. Yeah.
It does anything but provide affordable housing. It doesn't do that. And the community of Plymouth, and I know Pembroke has been struggling with this, that has to be revisited so that the communities can have some discretion and some say in how they invest in affordable housing.
Sure.
And where it's going to be located and how it's going to be zoned. But you don't get that. The problem is you have a piece of legislation that's antiquated and it's one size fits all. Well, what's good for Provincetown might not be good for
Well,
Westport
yeah,
or
I mean,
Worcester
that's-
or Boston.
Right, of course not, of course not. So, as I said, we do have the highest tax per thousand here on the Cape. And you said something about services, and we're paying for what we have, and what we have is a beautiful, beautiful, quintessential New England seaside town.
Sure.
That's what we've got. There's a lot of discussion going on in the community right now about the high rate of taxes that we pay.
In Sandwich.
In Sandwich, right. And I think, and a lot of it has to do with, we don't have services like trash pickup, and you have to pay for that. That's actually, you can take your trash to the dump, but you still have to pay for it.
Correct.
You pay bag by bag, that kind of thing, and plus a.
Sure, we have 4 enterprise funds in Plymouth: airport,
Yeah.
water, sewer, and solid waste. We have 1 transfer station.
Yeah.
And yes, if you want a transfer station sticker, you get the sticker. If not,
Yeah.
if you want curbside, you have to go to the private sector.
Right, right. So I think, we said, as I said, my husband and I and 3 kids who are now grown up and have their own kids and live other places. We moved here because of the way it looked. We wanted to live in this particular place because it was so beautiful and it was so terrific and very different from where we came from, which was Ohio. But the beauty can only last so long. And then, what do they say, the rose fades or something?
The bloom fades off.
Yeah,
the
the rose, is that what it is? So, for a lot of people on the Cape, they're discouraged, I guess. They want to stay here,
Sure.
especially young people. They want to stay here. They can't afford to live here. They, in a town like Sandwich, we have no commercial, so there's not a lot paying for taxes here other than the property owners, because we don't have commercial here.
Sure.
And that was by choice years ago. So I just wondered if you've got a sense of economic development for this part of the region, because Plymouth has gone great guns forever.
Okay, don't believe that has worked out for the town of Plymouth. Sure.
See, I thought it
So
had.
I've studied dozens of municipal budgets around New England. There's a power plant in Plymouth.
Yeah.
Okay, so
You're talking about the nuclear one?
yeah, so if you convert all the payments since 1972 till today, 48 payments from a nuclear power plant at 3% for inflation, depending on what you want to use for inflation, for present value,
Yeah.
they've paid us between $1 and $2 billion since '72. The town of Plymouth has nothing to show for it. So I've analyzed predominantly communities post-World War II in Plymouth, so that's not economic development.
No.
That level of taxpayer, the town of Plymouth effectively hit $1 billion scratch ticket,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And that was one of the promoters of out-of-control residential sprawl during the 70s and 80s. And then tens of thousands of people come to the community, and you have to provide them with services and maintain
Right.
their infrastructure. So I've looked at Vernon, Vermont, Wiscasset, Maine, Seabrook, New Hampshire, Somerset, Massachusetts, and I haven't looked at Sandwich. And I know you have what I would call a silver bullet industrial application on the canal.
Well, we have the power plant.
That's what I'm calling that.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I haven't dialed into that one yet, the numbers and
Right.
how much money. But so the general fund doesn't work. And if the business of Sandwich, Massachusetts is going to exist 50, 100, 150 years from now, the biggest thing that you could do for your taxpayers here is to create an infrastructure fund outside of the general fund. Okay? And you're going to do that without property taxes. And there's a multitude of ways of doing that.
sure.
And you can, so what you're doing is you're creating a financial firewall. Under your current structure, everything you're doing is based on raising property taxes and making everything more expensive than it has to be. And that is another factor with respect to affordable housing. So when you go offer a school, and you're going to bond that school over 30 years,
Right.
okay, for every dollar that you borrow, you're paying back $1.80 to $2 on the dollar.
Right.
Okay? Now, with respect to roads, there's a law in Massachusetts, and it's a good law, thank God. You're only allowed to bond no more than 15 years. So if you're bonding something over 15 years, whether it be roads, maybe a fire station or a police station,
Right.
you're paying back $1.50 for every dollar that you borrow. So the entire fiscal approach of communities
I
is to
see.
make everything as expensive as possible.
Right. Right.
So the town of Plymouth, if we had a properly funded infrastructure fund, and I'm a huge advocate of that,
But you're a selectman, right?
yes, well, you have to get Republicans and Democrats to go with you because thinking outside the box is not easy.
Right. Okay.
We could prevent property taxes from
Okay.
going up billions. If you can leave the money alone, think long term, and actually set up an endowment or a legacy for the future. But government doesn't do that. It's the same thing in Sandwich, it's probably just at smaller level.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. The
So
same.
there's a whole multitude of variables that go into affordable housing. But
Well, Bourne is interesting because it straddles the canal.
both sides.
Both sides of the canal. So they're in a conundrum too half the time.
Correct.
You know? What's going on one side is not going on the other side, you know? So do you have thoughts about that or?
I canvassed a neighborhood in Sagamore Beach a couple weekends ago. And I went to the end of the cul-de-sac and I was at the last house.
Yeah,
You know, 100 yards through the woods, you entered Plymouth.
yeah.
And the individual came out on this porch and said, John, I just want to let you know this is the first house on Cape Cod. And he explained to me why. So that was a
I
good one.
see. That's a good one.
So he goes, you don't have to be on Cape Cod, it's not over the canal. He goes,
It's right here. That's right,
So-
that's right.
So I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, the question was just, you know, how do you look at all these towns that are so unique and have such individuality? How are you going to look at them as your district and put it all together? Because certainly Falmouth is different than Pembroke, I would think, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I said to you earlier that the
Yeah.
core issues are the same.
Right.
Okay, and then absolutely, there are some unique issues with respect
Right.
to all 6 communities.
Right.
At the end of the day, you're hopefully electing an individual with a certain amount of energy that's going to go up to Beacon Hill.
Yeah,
And if this happens in the first, second week of April, you're going right into the budgetary process. So what are we doing?
Right away.
You're competing. You're in a competition to bring your hard-earned dollars back to the district,
Sure.
especially with respect to infrastructure investment. So, I mean, that's what we're going after. That's what we're going after. You're going to replace your 2 bridges. You're probably 5, 6 years away. By the time you get around to that, it's not going to be $1 to $1.5 billion. It's going to be $1.5 to $2.5 billion.
Right, right. And of course, we have to deal with the Corps of Engineers.
I have no problem doing that. I think they do a great job.
You know, so far they're still there.
And obviously, you want 100%, if you know, you want the majority, if
Right.
not all of the funding to come from the federal government.
Yeah, I don't know that it is.
So, and then the Corps of Engineers. So the second biggest thing they've ever done, the second biggest thing in Massachusetts history is the canal and the bridges.
Right.
So the number one thing they did was back in the 1930s was setting up the Quabbin Reservoir.
Oh, sure.
Okay?
Sure. Yeah.
So you look at all those communities within the 128
Right.
belt.
Yeah.
So when Marty Walsh gets the benefit of a new 50 to 60 story high rise going up over South Station,
It's because of the Quabbin.
it's because of the Quabbin. Water was created. They created an ecosystem. They went into tree hugging mode around it. They set up a pristine environment, and they don't let human activity out there. Okay?
No, I know that.
And it's gravity fed into the city, and those developers, you see all those cranes along that skyline, that's because of the Quabbin. And I got to stop pointing at things. So if the Quabbin didn't exist, you don't have that level of economic development within the 128.
Right.
So
So you're going to do that here? What's the Quabbin for your district? I'm not talking about water.
there is a Quabbin in the district. It's a naturally occurring Quabbin.
Yeah.
And 60 years ago, the state legislature gave the city of Brockton complete control over it.
Okay.
And that is Silver Lake.
Oh, sure, sure.
So Silver Lake, obviously I went to that regional high school.
Yeah.
I think it's bordered by all four towns, Halifax, Plimpton, Kingston, and Pembroke. Late 50s, early 60s, you know, they had the political muscle. Brockton got control of that body of water.
Sure.
And 20 to 30 years ago, they were taking 18 million gallons a day out of it.
Wow.
Today, they only take 9, and it has not compromised their ability to promote whatever economic development they can.
Right. Well, Brockton's a tough city. It's got some big problems, which you don't have to worry about because
Sure.
it's not in your district.
But that's the Quabbin. And so here's a city, and you talk about water, that not only has a Quabbin available to them, but also had to go into desalinization.
Sure.
But if they had only gone to conservation and proactive infrastructure investment a decade before,
Sure.
they would have saved themselves over $250 million.
And that's what you want to do for this district.
I'm not going to sell the taxpayer down the road, the future taxpayer down the road, in order to make myself look good politically. I won't be doing that.
Yeah.
The single greatest thing that the district and any community on Cape Cod can do is do whatever they can to make sure that they don't have to go to desalinization, because that is in the future of numerous Massachusetts communities and communities around America
Sure.
at the rate that we're going,
Sure. Well, the sea level is rising.
including Plymouth.
right?
So we
Really?
just had a
Wow.
300-page report come in from environmental partners. We are outstripping our firm capacity by 2022. We don't have enough water. They want us to have 3 new well sites online within a decade. We have 1 site coming online this year, Forges
Wow.
Field. And then, of course, the question is, where
Where
are
the
the other 2
others go?
sites?
Yeah.
Well, in Plymouth, you need to have the land to invest in the infrastructure to draw the water out of the ground and get it into the system. And we don't have that. And if we don't figure that out quickly, I'm guessing in 15 to 20 years, they'll be talking desalinization, which is an absolute embarrassment
Yeah.
because the Plymouth and Carver Aquifer has 500 billion gallons of water under it. And so that debt, so it's amazing to me that in the 1930s, in Boston and the 128 belt figured it out, but other communities can't.
Amazing. Totally amazing.
Yes.
All right. Well, I wish you luck.
Okay, thank you.
You've got some competition,
Yeah, we have
which
some,
is not a bad thing.
we have some phenomenal competition.
That's great.
But
It
we
makes
have
you all better, I think.
I think it does too. So we're not worried about the Super Bowl yet. We're just trying to get through the AFC Championship, which is on March 3rd,
Yes, yes, yes.
which is 5 weeks from tomorrow.
I know.
Obviously, there's a website and Facebook pages, and we have our first forum coming up, candidate forum at Kingston Town
Excellent.
Hall.
Excellent.
This Saturday morning at 10 a.m.
Excellent. I like that when they do them in the morning instead of at night.
And I think there's something coming up at the Falmouth Public Library the following Wednesday, I believe. That's at night.
Yeah.
And WATD will do something in their forum in Marshfield. It's
Yeah.
out of the district, but we love
Well,
ATD.
I would think that probably the Enterprise newspapers, they conduct usually do some sort of a joint thing with this station and other stations. So
Sure.
I'm sure they'll do something here in Sandwich as well. Certainly was nice to meet you, John.
All right, Melinda, thank you for coming
You
on
take
the show.
care. Thank you. John Mahoney, running for state senate. Very nice gentleman and very, very smart, it seems to me. Seems to know a lot about certainly the Off Cape area up to Pembroke, but he's learning a lot and also knows a lot about Falmouth, Bourne, and Sandwich that he'll be representing. So give him a shout out, give him a look at. Go to one of his town halls. He's having one in Falmouth in the not too distant future. Always good. Just one thing for sure, make sure you vote. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it very much, and I'll catch you next time on another Cape Conversation.